It's always fun to meet great women from other great women. I have to give a shout out to Alicia Merlot for introducing me to our guest today. Welcome, Shawna. How are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm elated to be here. As you said, I think it's just so inspiring just to meet other women and collaborate with other women and just humanize who we are as women. So thank
I
you so
love
much for this
that.
opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you are an inspiration. So when Alicia introduced us, I was like, I can't wait to feature her because what you're doing is incredible. And I'm sure the audience will love your story. So, but diving in before we get to all the fun that you're up to today, let's back it on up. So talk to us. So I always love starting with your first job and then your current job. So where did you begin?
Oh, my first job. I was a camp counselor when I was, before I could have my driver's license. So I was riding my bike to summer camp every day of the Sacramento triple digit heat weather.
Oh my God.
And because I was riding my bike so much, I ended up tying on a Walkman. I mean, talk about aging myself. A Walkman with portable speakers that went into the little port for audio. And I didn't duct tape them because I wasn't that, obvious, but I somehow secured them to my bike handlebars. So I thought I was the coolest person riding my bike to work with my stereo system, essentially homemade DIY stereo system on my bike. And then I evolved into working at the Gap and Sunglass Hut because I liked working in the malls and then I would spend my paycheck. I mean, not maybe the best money manager back then, but yeah. And then my current job is I am the founder of Destination Aesthetics Medical Spa. And that whole journey has been so fun. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit today. But my previous title was CEO. So obviously, kind of in charge of everything. And I still have that job, but we got acquired last year in March. And so my new title is founder. So, but happy to still be continuing to do exactly what I have been doing for so long. And yeah, you
Yeah.
can see I'm still always on call. So let me turn
No,
that
the
off. I
chief everything
apologize.
officer, that's the joy of being a founder, and I am one of the reasons I was really excited to feature you is to talk about being acquired. For a woman to
Yeah.
start a business, such a successful business, and then get acquired is really impressive. But before we dive in, I wanna it's really cool to see that you were such a hard worker even from the beginning and the way you did your stereo and all that stuff. It shows you were kind of an entrepreneur, creative, out of the gate, whether you realized it or not. You were trailblazer. That's awesome. And so, yeah, tell me about the impetus to starting the company that ultimately got acquired. I know the aesthetic industry is a fun industry. I had the good fortune of owning a med spa for a little bit, and it's not
Mhm.
an easy industry. It's an amazing industry, but to have the success you've had is really impressive.
Thank you so much. I'm just so blessed to have the support and resources and cheerleaders and amazing people on my team to get me to where I am today. Obviously, it's not a one person show ever. And so it's everywhere from my family to friends to obviously our amazing patients and then of course the team, which is everything.
Yes.
So it's so funny because I was one of those people who judged others for getting work done. But this is
Oh,
way back in the
interesting.
day. I mean, not to like a hater standpoint, but I definitely was
Yeah,
like, oh, I don't need to do that to feel better about myself, but you don't
totally.
know what you don't know. And
Yes.
that's the biggest, I'd say, gateway into the field of understanding why we do what we do. So if there are investors, if I'm speaking on panel and there are investors in the audience with private equity or whatever and looking to acquire and get into the medical spa business, my number one suggestion to them is go get a facial, go get
Yeah.
Botox, go get something so you understand what you're buying into because they're looking at it as all objective measurements and numbers and all of these things, but you truly have to understand the product and the passion behind the people and why we do what we do. So that's what I suggest.
Well,
And
I'm gonna
so it
pause
was,
you on that. I'm glad
yeah.
you're saying that because, I kinda had that same I didn't know the aesthetic world until I had the good fortune of meeting Dr. Grant Stevens and entering in this world, I had some of that same preconception, and I
Mhm.
appreciate that you're saying that because the aesthetic world is so much more than what people realize. It's not necessarily just about vanity or everyone
Right.
fitting this beauty mold or beauty standard. There's so
Completely.
much more to it, and it's about, beauty on your terms and how
Mhm.
the outside needs to match how you feel on the inside. And so I'm glad that you brought that up.
I am writing that down because I love what you just said. Beauty
Yes.
on your terms. That I have goosebumps. That should go on a billboard. That should be the tagline for our industry in addressing the consumer, because it
Yes.
should be on their terms. And a lot of people think that the aesthetics is what they see on Instagram or what other people's perceptions are, and it's not.
Right.
It's their own journey. So
Yes.
you should get into marketing with aesthetics. Do you want a
Well,
job?
I may or may not have that domain, beautyonyourterms.com, because I do. I mean, when I was entering into the world of aesthetics, I was nervous about it because I am not the mold. I just didn't come from that world. And so I didn't want
Yeah.
to feel like I was pushing a certain narrative or a certain look or vibe, because I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of stigma in that world, and it doesn't have to be.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it's so funny that you say that because I didn't think I fit that mold either. I mean, I was always kind of an athlete growing up, and I didn't really wear makeup, and I didn't really care about my aesthetics. But as I grew older, I started noticing these gnarly crow's feet on my
I mean,
face. And I'm
right?
like, what in the actual is going on? And then I was just starting to think maybe I would jump into getting Botox. And it was funny because it was really the show Dr. 90210 that came out that was kind of like the first reality TV show that was centered around aesthetics. And I was just like, oh, these breast implants,
Yes.
I've always been small chested, and okay, I'm diving into TMI, but
It's
it really
unfiltered
was.
insights. Here we are.
Yeah. And then I had my first child, and I'm like, well, I used to be small chested. Now I'm like not chested at all. And so I was watching these people go on this TV show and just do small minor cosmetic touches, and they were shopping for bathing suits in a week after, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And so then I became a considerer, and then I went and got a consult, and now, I have water bags in my chest. I mean, I don't know what to say. That's like the reality of my
Yeah.
journey. But then again, it totally broke the stigma for myself into what that looks like. So now when patients come into me and they're asking me, I'm considering doing this, whether it's surgical, non-surgical, it's like, hell yeah. If it's going to make you feel better and empowered and mighty and strong and beautiful and all of these things, I haven't honestly had one person regret doing any of that,
Yeah.
regret it. Everyone's like, I wish I would have done it sooner.
Right.
And so, us as women, and as a purveyor myself and a consumer, I'm an advocate, obviously, for just champion people to do what makes you feel best. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. You're a nurse at heart, nurse practitioner. And
Yeah.
so, I think in this industry, I think it's interesting to see nurse practitioners become business owners, right? And really
Hmm.
grow this incredible business that ultimately got acquired. When you're
Yeah.
going to school to become a nurse or nurse practitioner, they're not teaching you how to run a business, I assume. Um,
Right.
what was
Yeah.
that transition from doing the nurse practitioner aspect
Hmm.
of it to becoming a
Hmm.
business owner and then taking it to the level you took it?
Well, part of my personal journey and avenue on how I got into that and possibly into entrepreneurship is I entered a program with nurse practitioners called an acute care nurse practitioner program. And at the time when I graduated and the time that I applied, there were only two colleges that offered this program. So it's basically a nurse practitioner specializing in acute care. So that could be emergency room medicine, critical care medicine. It was kind of breaking the standard traditional nurse practitioner working in a primary care clinic, and we wanted to be acute care based. So at the time there was only UCSF, and I think there was one on the East Coast as well. So I applied, I got accepted, and I was specializing in critical care, which that's where I worked at as a nurse. So when I graduated in 2002 with my ACNP, acute care nurse practitioner degree, when I graduated and I got a job, thankfully, I was basically a scribe. I was a scribe for the critical care doctors, and I would basically write their notes. I would write their orders as we did rounds, and I would kind of go and do very low level kind of grunt, we call grunt work type of protocols and orders and things like that. And it took me 1.5 years to get even permission to have privileges in one of the hospitals that I worked at, because it was, no offense to men, but it was like all male dominated board members who didn't want a mid-level working in the hospital because we just didn't exist back then. And now fast forward to today, and mid-levels are all over the hospitals and part of an integrative team all over the place with surgical teams, internal medicine, and critical care. And so that role has evolved, but it was so dissatisfying to me because I'm like, I spent all this time getting a higher education, getting my NP, and I'm basically a scribe. So,
and I think that happens in a lot of industries where we go and we seek all this education. We think we're going to have one kind of career, and then you're like, this is not at all what I expected.
100%. And another thing too, which I'm kind of going on a tangent now, but when I took a nurse practitioner job, I took a pay cut. As a brand new nurse practitioner versus a semi-experienced nurse, I took a pay cut. And this is a mentality that's hard for me to kind of adjust and pivot into today's world, because now people want to get paid for things before they even get, tasked to do it. And they don't want to take that investment into looking like the broader picture of potentially making more money, but it takes grind and grit to get there. So anyway, going back to my journey, then I basically was looking for something that fulfilled me in a different way, because I was like, this is not kind of what I signed up for. I want to be more part of a team and be kind of in the trenches more with the patient management side. And so I was just searching for something that kind of filled my bucket a little bit more. I also wanted to do something semi-flexible, because taking call in the hospital and maybe working weekends and holidays wasn't necessarily conducive to the young family that I had at the time. And so I was just searching, and actually one of the PAs that worked in the hospital with me had opened up a medical spa. So I had seen the advertisements for Latisse, and I asked her if she carried it. She's like, oh yeah, I'll prescribe it for you and come bring it to you in the hospital. So we did the little drug deal at the hospital. I paid for the Latisse, I got my drug, and then I started using it, and it just like rocked my world. I'm like, oh my God, I am obviously Asian. And I have stubby, really short, sparse. I made my eyelashes longer, thicker, darker. I was like, this is the most amazing thing since sliced bread. So that was my gateway into aesthetics. And so long story short, I started doing aesthetics on the side. And at the time, I owned and operated a residential board and care facility for the elderly, which I guess had started my entrepreneurial spirit and kind of first business. So I had it in me, but I didn't realize that drive was inside of me, because as you said, when you're going to nursing school and you go to NP school, there's no discussion about business at all. Like, you're an employee, you go to work and you clock in and you clock out and you take care of people. That's your job. So everything in that early onset, and still today, so much self-discovery, so much pivots and pitfalls and successes. So this is kind of how we've evolved as an industry, I feel, because so many of us haven't had that formal training. And so it's great to have the community that we do, where we can bounce off each other and cheerlead for each other. And that's what Alicia Merlot, love you, Alicia, has done for myself. And so many people. And it's people like that elevate us, not just mentally and spiritually, but also physically. And it's just such a great community to be a part of.
That I'm glad you bring that up, because, prior to entering the world of aesthetics, I had started a business, a co-working business, all by myself. And I remember when I entered into the aesthetic business, all these vendors and people like Alicia coming out of the woodwork. And I was so blown away by the support. It was such a very different experience. Co-working was amazing. I had a lot of women champion me, but we didn't have vendors. We didn't have the relationships that you do in the aesthetic industry, and having those partners who are truly invested in your success.
They absolutely are truly invested. And it's crazy, because some people ask me, what are some tips and tricks, and what do you do? And with regards to just my own personal experience, my partnership with Allergan, it's like, listen to the business development managers, because they have now touch points on, just say, 50,000 practices across the company. And they have taken the best and brightest minds and figured out what works and what doesn't work, and put it into basically best practices. You want to have an event, you want to market Botox Cosmetic, you want to have DTC, direct to consumer marketing, you want all of these things. Just listen, because they are advocates for you. And a lot of people have the mentality that they are just salespeople. They just want to sell you this. They just want to sell you that so they can hit their quota. They actually intentionally want to make you succeed.
Yeah.
And by making you succeed, yes, they will succeed as well. But the positive intent is there. And so it's just really simple. I just said, listen to what they recommend. Do what they tell you to do, and they'll make it happen for you.
No, I think that's great advice to anyone that's wanting to enter into this world. And so, getting your aesthetic and getting your practice off the ground, I'm sure was one thing. And then growing it to the size that you did, what do you attribute your success to getting it to that level? And what were some of the lessons learned along the way? Because to be acquired, you definitely have to, get to that certain level that so few people are able to do.
Whew. Yeah, it's
how much time do we have today?
Seriously,
so what advice do you have for someone who has a med spa or has a practice that they're like, it's going well, but I dream one day of being acquired?
Yeah, and that's crazy because I hear that so much now for people who are who haven't even opened up their practice yet. They're like, wow, how can I set myself up to be acquired in like 3 years? And I'm just like, wait, come again? Because it's the mentality now is that the exit is part of the plan. And part of me is like, 50% of me is like, yeah, I'm like, good for you for planning so far in advance, because it was not even on my radar, just say even like 3 years ago for me.
Sure.
And so kudos to you. But at the same time, I'm just like, wait, are you serious? Because do you know what it takes to get to the point of even being appealing to a private equity company or a family office to be acquired?
Yes.
It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. But
and I appreciate you saying that, because, I do think there's a lot of pressure as a founder CEO to think about the end in mind. So I get why there's that momentum, but everything takes like double the time and double the money than you ever believe. And in some ways, I remember being in that place and that blind ignorance, if I'm being honest, or blind ambition. It's almost like you have to have that to have the courage to do it. But then also it's a double-edged sword, because by having it, when things aren't going as fast as you expect it to go, you're sort of beating yourself up over it. So I'm glad you're talking about that.
Yeah, and I mean, there are vulnerable time points in the journey where you ask yourself, do I want to be the one in charge anymore? And that's kind of where I was headed towards the end, when I decided to put myself up to be acquired. But I remember during COVID when we were closed for 2 months and not knowing what that looked like earlier on, and asking myself, like, I just kind of want to crawl in a hole right now and maybe not come out for a while. But you don't have that choice as a CEO and as that person leading your team, because you have to show up. And not only do you have to show up, but you have to show up motivated. You have to show up with a plan. You have to show up and be strong for your team. And so, but there were days where, there were a lot of social things going on in the world, and it was, everything was unknown. And I was sitting there drinking probably too much wine every single night. Asking myself that question. But, when I think about the journey, and I do so much more reflecting now, post acquisition, I'm giving myself that space to say, whoa, what did it take? What did I learn? And it's so much. But I've just been so thankful along the way to have the most amazing patients, the most amazing team to help elevate, to be successful in opening up basically one additional location after our first, every year and a half, essentially, starting in 2015 when we had our biggest location. So we went from 1 room to 2 rooms, and then to 8 rooms in 2015. We started basically in 2012, essentially. We incorporated in November 2011, but essentially we're starting to see patients in 2012. So in 3 years, we went from 1 room to 2 rooms to 8 rooms at our current Sacramento location that has 8 rooms. And then after that, in 2015, we opened up 4 more locations on average about every year and a half. And it really was not strategic. I wish I could say I had a game plan to open up 5 locations and then sell my business. It's like, that did not happen that way. We were
Yeah.
blessed to enter into the field of aesthetics at a good time when it was really, I mean, everyone had double-digit growth for year after year. And then coming out of COVID, as you know, we had a
Yes.
crazy boom with a ton of pent-up demand. People were staying at home. They weren't spending money. They weren't investing in themselves. Everyone kind of came out of their hole and
Yeah.
emerged back into the world wanting to feel beautiful and get
Yes.
fulfilled and all of these things. And everyone had money to do it.
And
No
we're
one was
staring at
traveling.
ourselves on camera all day. You know, the Zoom
Oh,
effect
I
is
know.
real. Yeah.
That was literally a real thing. And it's so funny that you say that because when I was at home and I was Zooming with my team, I'm like watching my face melt day after day. And I'm like, I'm going to stay strong because my team's not getting Botox. Da, 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 da. And then I'm like, screw this shit. Like, I am going into the refrigerator and whipping up some Botox and spruced myself up. It was so
No,
funny.
I definitely get that. Yeah, it was a hard time, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a hard time.
it sounds like the industry has evolved and changed quite a bit through the time, you know, and your growth. It sounds, you know, with business, it is all about timing, and it sounds like you hit it at a really good time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think coming out now of the huge growth that everyone saw in 2022, 2023, you know, kind of the softening a little bit in Q3, Q4 2023, where everyone's like, what is happening? We are not used to seeing this where patients are considering maybe not buying that retail product or not getting injectables 4 to 5 syringes at a time, or maybe not investing in that laser package. It was like, what's happening? But I mean, as we know, there's no business model or industry that can sustain double-digit growth year after year for decades. I mean, it's just not. But we do have amazing positive indicators that the community will and the businesses will grow with regards to aesthetics in doubling over the next 5 years. So that's good. But the practicality and the additional expenditure that people have just in their monthly cash flow is not as robust as it used to be.
It
And then
isn't.
now
So,
we have the influx of all of the weight loss, you know,
yeah.
semaglutide and Ozempic. So those are very expensive programs. And I just know ours, for example, is $550 a month for maintenance. And people are on this for a long time.
Yeah.
So you have to say, okay, they're spending $550 a month. That's
Wow.
kind of an average, just say Botox treatment. So what are they not getting now because of this? And so it's going to be an interesting twist on the economics of our practice and where, you know, your pie of revenue is going, because if they're expending here, they're probably taken away from another bucket. And so it's going to be an interesting evolution.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant regardless if you're in the aesthetic industry, you know, is
Mm-hmm.
that how people spend their money, what are they spending it on? How do you stand out in a crowded field and when things get
Mm-hmm.
tight? I mean, what advice do you have? I mean, how did your company navigate some of those challenges and especially now with the weight loss drug? How are you helping people to still want to do Botox or some of these other things that they were spending money on before?
Well, I think the want has not faded at all. In fact, I think the want is even more. When you can't necessarily have what you want, I know that for me, it's like I want it more. It's not a good healthy mindset, but it's reality. And
Yes.
so I think that what we've seen through our own research, and I think also from industry research, is that the neurotoxins are non-negotiable. People are not going to give up their Botox,
Yeah.
etc. They're just not. But they might choose to forego the other things as I was talking about. But I think in order to stay relevant and stay ahead and to stay cutting edge and all of those things is you just have to maintain a healthy brand. You have to maintain healthy outcomes and a
Mhm.
patient experience and all of those things. And I think now what we're finding is turning our marketing a little bit more specific. So instead of having just global messaging and, you know, maybe a stock photography image of this and putting your promotion, it has to be so much richer than that.
Yes.
People are smart consumers now. They will stalk your Instagram page. They will dive deep. They will dive
Yeah.
into your reviews. They basically know you before they even step foot into the office. And so you have to be very cognizant in what that looks like to the consumer and the messaging that's put out, because how we marketed before is completely different now. We kind of have lookalike audiences of, the Hispanic market is the fastest growing demographic culturally in the field of aesthetics.
Wow,
And
that's
so,
interesting.
yeah, and also men. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, men.
exactly.
It's like, yeah, they care too, and they should, and they deserve to be treated as well. And so pivoting and looking at what those niches look like and speaking to your audience directly is very important. And then just hiring good people and making sure that we're doing justice to the field of aesthetics in general, and
Yes.
making sure that people attribute a medical spa to a professional organization. So I'm so grateful to entities like AMSPA, American Medical Spa Association, because they really tried to professionalize the med spa space. And when
Yeah.
I came into the field, I was a medical spa, obviously, and I didn't have a core physician, aka plastic surgeon dermatologist, as a medical director. And so I feel like we had to work 10 times harder to bring the professionalism and credential to the term medical spa, because we were new on the playing field in our space locally. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to work hard, and I wanted to show that we could, through training and development, still provide great outcomes, safe outcomes, all of
Yes.
those things. So.
Well, and I think you bring up so many good points again that cuts across industries. Ever
Mhm.
since COVID, there's been this influx of content and this influx of information, and it's at
Mhm.
people's fingertips. And it's like, how do you
Yeah.
stand in the noise? And I think I like that you're bringing up this whole idea of being very targeted and very clear and very personalized. People want to get to know brands in a personal way. And I think that's great advice, whether you're in aesthetics, or
Mhm.
industry. You
Yep.
got to speak to your consumer. So I love that you're talking about that. I'm curious, as you grew your business and then you sold it, you got
Mhm.
acquired. What is that transition? So few women business owners have that experience. And so if there's someone listening that wants to potentially sell their business, what is that like? And what has that experience been like since you've sold it? Because you're still working in the
Mhm.
business that you built. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times people don't realize that that's very common.
Yes, and it was honestly non-negotiable for me with regards to finding a partner who would still allow me to be in the role that I am, because I mean, Destination Aesthetics is my other child. I have two human children. Destination Aesthetics is a different type of child.
Yeah.
And I also think of all of our employees as family members. And so I didn't want to just obviously sell and leave. That wasn't my intention ever. And so finding a good partner who is going to stick and adhere to your core values and in alignment with your core values was the number one thing for me. It wasn't who was going to give the best offer, who was going to give the best terms. For me, it was who's going to take care of my family the best, who's going to take care of our patients the best, and make sure that that is all protected. And obviously there are variables that when you sign on the dotted line you don't know, and honestly they don't know either, the private equity group or the family office. Things happen in life, things happen in business, and so not everything can be obviously 100% secure. I mean, life is not 100% secure, as we know. But
Yes.
life post acquisition has been, there are highs and there are lows. Highs because I am not the legal responsible person at the end of the day, so I can kind of sleep a little bit better at night, but I still act and think like I am the owner. I have to. And I just do. It's like you can't cut that off. You
No.
still care. In fact, I
Still your
tell
child
people,
in a
yeah,
way, right?
yeah. And I tell people I feel like I almost care more because now I'm going into like uber protective mama bear mode.
Yeah.
Instead of just like I'm mama bear mode, now I'm uber protective because I just feel like, okay, I am the protector of everything here. So, and then with regards to lows, I wouldn't really say low, but just challenges, right?
Yes.
So, and our company, I partnered with Advanced Metastatic Partners. They have been exceptional with regards to what that partnership looks like, and kind of holding true to kind of what I had bought into, right? But they are the first people to admit that they were trying to fly the plane as they built it, and I
Yeah.
knew that going in
Yeah.
because I think they incorporated in September of 2022. They had their first acquisition in, I believe, November 2022. And then I partnered in March 2023. So I was one of the early partners. So I 100% knew what I was getting into. And the thing that it's different for me is I come from corporate, meaning I worked in hospitals. I mean, you can't get more corporate than working in hospitals. But this is kind of new to me in kind of being in a corporate world with partners. But the best thing of the partnership is now I do have literal partners. So if we can, if I have something challenging, if one of my providers has something challenging, I have a plethora of professionals that we can reach out to, that we can advocate for each other, present hard cases, talk about compensation, talk about all of the things. And so you do have almost an internal mastermind group that is like a new family. So that is what I found for myself and for even our managers and our team to have access to that. And then there are a lot of perks that the platform has supported with regards to training and development for our team that I couldn't have provided myself. And so it's been an experience, but a positive experience. And I 100% would do it again. And I think that's what people ask is like, would you do it again? Or are you glad? Yes, I'm glad I did it when I did it, who I chose. And I'm happy with where we're at right now.
I think that's incredible. And I appreciate that you're talking the way you are, because with anything, there's always strengths and shadows, right? No matter how amazing it is, even just the evolution, I'm sure, as how it felt personally. I mean, there's somewhat of a loss. And I wonder if there's even a little bit of grief and just that transition of how it felt.
There definitely was. And like, I have goosebumps again because just kind of reliving what that felt like. And a lot of it was just the unknown.
Of course.
And the team, when we had to tell the team that they would no longer be an employee of DA, they're going to be an employee of AMP, Advanced Metastatic Partners. Just the tears that came through, and it's just like a new identity. But what I have tried to do in that uber protective mama mode is trying to maintain that we still are Destination Aesthetics. We still are the DAGs. My necklace says hashtag,
I love
hashtag DAG. So Destination Aesthetics, girl or guy. So everyone who works at DA is a DAG. Every patient is a DAG as well by default. Awesome. But that's just been what I'm trying to continue to stronghold is that we still are DA.
Absolutely. Well, it's like your kid going off to college, right? Like that's such a loss for parents. That transition is such a change of identity, of experience, of letting go in some ways. Even if it's like the best thing ever and you're so excited for your child, there's still that loss and grief. And grief isn't always easy to navigate. So I appreciate you being transparent.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of grief, that was one of the reasons why I even considered looking into selling. I had lost a good friend of mine, unfortunately, tragically, in an accident. And my daughter was really struggling with some mental health issues at the time. I had found a biological full sibling sister on Ancestry.com. And so nurturing a new relationship. And then my husband was working for the business after his family business sold actually right before COVID, and he was working in DA. So I was his boss, and I'm like, this is just not sustainable for our marriage and just for general. Like I could just tell like he was doing it for me to help me, and he would have done it the rest of his life, but I didn't want him to. So it's kind of like releasing him of that kind of those shackles. I don't want to say shackles, that's being dramatic, but I wanted to release him out of the business so he could kind of find something on his own to do. So yeah, grief was 100% part of what made me even consider, because I mean, like I said, 3 years ago, I wouldn't even think about selling DA, but it was like all of these things happened basically all at the same time. And it just all came into an epiphany basically of like, what does this look like? I don't know. So then I started exploring. And then, as you know, and like you said earlier, it's like, no, they want to retain you. It's like, okay, well, I do want to be retained. So maybe that is the best of both worlds. And that's what it ended up being.
Yeah. And I think the universe does conspire on our behalf. And again, I appreciate your transparency, because as business owners, everything bleeds, right? Your personal life is so impacting your professional life and vice versa. And it's okay. I mean, I decided to put down my business because I wanted to really focus on, one, I was tired from trying to find a site. I too had as you know, revelation through 23andMe. There's
Yes.
just so many layers. And I think we need to give
Mhm.
ourselves permission that there is a season to
Mhm.
do one thing and there's a season to do another. And there's no shame in that. And that
Yeah,
it's really
there's
about what's right for you at that time in life.
yeah, and I love that you are vulnerable and saying that you were tired. And when I go on stage and I talk about my experience, I also admit, like, coming out of COVID and riding that wave of the high and then the potential dip, it's like I at that point was exhausted. And when I say that on stage, I look in everyone's eyes and they are me too. And
Yes.
that's the okay. Like, it's okay to admit that you were exhausted. It's okay to admit that maybe you don't want to be the one in charge every single day. Like, those are normal feelings. And that's what we have to go and express. And that's why I love having platforms like this. Like, you are bringing this to the audience saying it's okay to admit that you're not strong 100% of the time for everyone around you every single day,
Yeah.
because we are, again, human beings with feelings, and we have capacity and we have boundaries, and we need to really nurture those and constantly evaluate what those are so we can show up and be the best versions of ourselves as best as we can.
Oh, I feel like that's such an exclamation point to this coffee conversation. I'm like, there's nowhere else to go from here. I mean, I really, you're so inspiring. And I think you're touching on so many points. And by being willing to be vulnerable, I think it empowers other people to strive in the way that you strive. So thank you for that. And I'm curious if somebody wants to, well, actually, no, I don't want to go there yet. I want to first do the signature question and then I'll go to that. Where can they go to?
Okay.
You already have said so many inspiring things and you are such an inspiration, but I think it's fun to have a signature question. Good old Sarah Blakely inspired me. And so if you had a coffee
Love
mug,
her.
I know, right? That you had something on there that someone could, drink and see every day, what would be your quote that you would put on there and why? And
So I
I
had to
think
think
really
about,
if you want.
yeah, I had to think about this, but it depends on my mood of the day. So I'm going to give you two variables. So if I wanted to be that motivating, inspiring leader, I would say, and here I had to write it down, but dreams don't stop working if you do. Keep grinding.
Oh, that's so good.
So that's my motivational, what I would put as a motivational comment on a mug. But I actually have a physical mug, which I've teased you earlier and you saw. But
Yeah.
depending on my other mood, sometimes this is what it takes to get the job done. And I will show you by taking
Yes,
a drink.
please do.
So it's IDK, IDC, IDGAF. And so I don't know if you guys know what that means, but the first part is I don't know, I don't care, and I don't give. And so this is
Believe.
literally, yeah, exactly. Sometimes I'm just like, this is my motto for the day.
I need to screenshot that because we all have those moments. And
Yeah.
I think that's very relatable, and especially on a Friday at this time of year. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're
And
all a little exhausted.
completely. And it's so funny. I was at a women's Mother's Day dinner last night, and I was talking to one of my friends, and she was saying how her husband is like such an emotional communicator. And so instead of just getting down to the point, which might hurt someone's feelings, there is a delivery and being empathetic, but you also sometimes have to just go straight to the point. And and that's just what you have to do sometimes. And that's hard, but
It's a nice balance of both. You have inspiring and to the point. I love it. Well, so if somebody wants to check out your spa, get to know you, connect with you, how can they do that?
so I'm on Instagram at botox.girl. I'm on LinkedIn as Shawna Chrisman. And then you can just reach me through email, Shawna at damedspa.com, and all the things. Yeah, I'd love to connect with people, and we're all here for each other. So let's just lift each other up and nurture each other. That's what we all need these days.
Well, we have to thank Alicia again. You are such an amazing guest, and I appreciate you. And thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you so much.